17th of July marks the Day of International Justice and constitutes a valid moment to reflect. Is the ICC achieving what the international community hoped it would achieve so many years ago at the Rome Conference?
Well, it's a good question on whether the ICC is achieving the promise upon which it was established, and it's appropriate to ask that question on 17th July, International Day of Justice. I look back as an older person who suffered under apartheid, where we had no remedies. There was no higher system to which we can appeal, saying that apartheid is a crime against humanity. So A, I thirst for justice, and B, we never had a mechanism such as the International Criminal Court since Nuremberg. So it took very, very long to establish this court. It's only 15 years old now. It's still a baby. It still has to prove itself. But the surprising thing is that they've handled so many cases so far. And secondly, that 124 states have ratified the Rome Statute. So I feel, A, it's a success, but it must be given more time to establish its jurisprudence.
We know that the ICC is not perfect, and in particular, several African states have had significant challenges with the ICC. What can we do to improve the relationship between some African states and the ICC?
Well, I see that there is a great deal of misconceptions, myths, and false propaganda. For instance, that the ICC is targeting African countries alone. Firstly, the ICC is not prosecuting countries. They are prosecuting individuals who are alleged to have committed these serious crimes. The one thing I did as an AGJA member at one of our events at the ASP in The Hague is to point out that the ICC website names the indictments in terms of the countries. And I said this is perpetuating the myth that ICC is prosecuting countries. And I'm very happy that the president of the International Criminal Court has now changed that. The indictments should be in the names of the individuals rather than placing priority on the states. There is a responsibility on the part of political leaders to explain to their population on the content of the statute and the limits of the jurisdiction of the ICC, that it has jurisdiction, for instance, only over states that have ratified the statute. I think there's a responsibility on the court itself to explain its work, particularly the prosecutor, to explain how she selects her cases and why she hasn't addressed other complaints that relate, for instance, to the attack on Iraq by Western countries. This is the grievance, particularly amongst the youth in Africa, that the ICC is rendering selective justice. The ICC then, I think, needs to play a very important role in educating people. Now let's take this targeting Africa. It's a fact that most of the cases, situations being investigated and prosecuted are in Africa. But the prosecutor doesn't choose. It depends on the evidence, as you know. And if the serious crimes are supported by evidence, the prosecutor has an obligation to investigate. The ICC operates independently based on evidence. There are checks and balances on the prosecutor. That's why the prosecutor, unlike a national prosecutor who has the power to issue indictments, not so with the ICC prosecutor. She has to be authorized by a judicial decision, a court that examines whether she has sufficient facts to focus on a particular situation. So these are built-in checks and balances. You know, the ICC was not created by the prosecutor or the judges. It was created by the states. They wanted this. They are committed to the principle of no impunity for these very serious crimes. And it's particularly our continent, Africa, that has been plagued by very serious crimes, and we have had to live through impunity for these very serious perpetrators. So it's no surprise that 5 of the African countries invited the ICC to prosecute, whereas previously we had no such mechanism. Now we have a mechanism where if a country is unable or unwilling to prosecute, they can get the help of the ICC. So bottom line, the ICC is there to assist states. It's there to render justice for victims. So I think that AGJA and all of us have a responsibility to come up with suggestions on how the provision of immunities can be addressed by the ICC without violating the principle of no impunity for these serious crimes. So I'll stop there. Thank you.